Hi there, it's Camila Rose from the Bliss Institute, and I am back again to do another movie review. This time it is the spoiler review for A Wrinkle in Time. I think I'm going to go ahead and throw in the book versus movie here as well, because that's a lot of what the spoilers are about. Let's get into it. So I like this movie. I thought it was really entertaining. If you watched the non-spoiler review, you know that how I feel about this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it went really quickly, but it was good. It was a good movie. Now, so much of what I liked about the book was not in the movie. I was like, wait, first of all, okay, if you've read the book, you'll know she has two other brothers, like they're the twins whose names I can't even remember. But I'm like, yo, where are the twins? They're just gone. They don't exist. And so I was like, okay, well, that's different. That's fine. They don't really play a large role in this book anyway, but I mean, if you read her books, you know they have a whole book about them, and you know Charles Wallace has a whole book about him. So that's, if they were going to do a sequel or something of that nature, I don't know if they'd magically find the twins somewhere or what. Anyways, so then we have Charles Wallace. And I really liked, well, he was still a little creepy in the book, but Charles Wallace was a genius. But he also had some kind of, best way to explain this, kind of extrasensory abilities. He knew things before other people knew them. He knew more than what other people would know, especially someone at his age. He knew what was going to happen before it actually happened. In the non-spoiler review, I talked about how in the beginning of the movie, Meg wakes up from a storm and she goes downstairs and Charles Wallace is already there and he's made her hot milk and he's made her sandwiches. So in the book, he's just like, oh, I figured you'd be down. Oh, I made a lot because you never know who's going to show up. And that's kind of the end of it. She's just like, oh, you're so sweet. You just care about me so much. This is so great. Well, in the book, it's made clear that Charles Wallace knew that she was coming down because that's a part of his abilities. And it shows up over and over again where he can anticipate what's happening. He knows what's going to occur before it occurs. He has these conversations with these people who no one else really sees or is open to, the witches, or the misses. And so even in the book, when he makes all the extra food, it's because the rest of the family is coming down and he knows that they will be coming. And so he makes more food to be able to feed the rest of his family. And so those are just some of the small things that you miss out on because by not having it put into the movie. And it did add a lot of the depth that I was speaking about that was missing from the movie, was because it wasn't just that Charles Wallace, first of all, he's not adopted in the book, so it's their actual son. So none of that conversation is really there, and it doesn't have to be this kind of weird, like, oh, he's your son, but he's not your son thing that's going on. And he's not interested in finding their father because for Meg, he's interested in finding their father because it's his dad. It's his dad. So you miss that element as well. You also miss how there's this whole thread about how the Murray family is really weird. They're kind of like the outcast of the entire town. And so Charles Wallace is strange because he knows too much and he's too smart for his own good, and he's little and he's just super bright. Meg is strange because she's clumsy and she's awkward and she's uncoordinated and she just doesn't she likes to read and she's really into math and she's just not, the norm. And then the twins, who don't exist in the movie, they're pretty much the only ones who are able to fit in. They turn down how smart they are and their connection to the world around them and their interest in science and things like that, and to this kind of weird external paranormal metaphysical world they turn those things down in order to blend in because they don't want to be ostracized like the rest of their family. And then you have their mother who, because she was doing all the work with their father, has kind of been shunned a little bit, and you know, no one wants to have the awkward conversation with the genius scientist's wife whose husband disappeared, you know, one day. So their whole family is just, that's the story behind the Maury family, is they're supposed to be this very bright family that just they don't fit in. And then we get to Calvin. So we're going to talk a lot about the characters here. We get to Calvin O'Keefe, who in the movie, someone else said it was Kingsley, when he did the review of the movie. He said he was kind of just there. I don't really get what his point was. And he kind of was just there. He added some support. He was, you got the feel, you could understand, because they literally told you that he was supposed to be the support system, the champion. He always stood up for what was right. He helped people to feel strong and to feel confident. So, like, yeah, you totally got that. But in the book, he's so important. Like, she makes reference in the movie to the fact that, oh, everyone likes you and you don't have these problems. You don't know what it's like to be picked on and things like that. But you don't really see any of that inside of the movie. You don't really see him getting along with everyone else or the way that people treat him. You just kind of have to go off of her word. Whereas there's more character development, of course. I mean, I know people are going to be like, Camila, it's a book and the book is not going to be the same as the movie. But it made his purpose more obvious in the book, not only as Meg's eventual love interest, but as his role that he served and how he actually, as the Murrays were an outcast, he was as well. Because in the book he's really good at basketball. He's really good. He's kind of like the popular kid, the jock know-it-all. He's just good at those things. And so everyone thinks he's amazing. And then there's this whole thing that goes on with Meg where she's like, why in the world would this person who is so great and so amazing and so perfect, why would they be interested in me? And so there's still that kind of exploration of self-esteem and self-worth and learning to love ourselves for who we are. It just plays out in a slightly different way. And then with that, you do see the juxtaposition between the O'Keefe household, which he's supposed to have a crap ton of brothers and sisters, which is part of the reason why he likes coming over to the Murray household, because they're warmer, they're closer. His home is, it's violent and abusive. And so he enjoys being in that space because it's warm and it's safe and it's comfortable and magical, amazing things happen there. He has these really great adventures when he's with the Murrays. So you miss all that. It just isn't there. And he's just this like kind of very, what do they call it? Where you face tune yourself on Instagram. He's just this very like face tune, super perfect skin and face, person that, gives her a lot of nods. Like, you got it, girl. Go ahead. You can do it. Like, there were a lot of times in the movies where I was just like, y'all just gonna stare at each other and like smile and then be like, okay. It's like you're not gonna like do anything else. All right then. So yeah. So about the characters, that was something that kind of got to me, that I had wished that they had done a little bit more work, added a little bit more of that. But I did understand that they had a time frame they were trying to fit, and there's a lot that happens. Even though these are not the largest books, there's a lot that happens in those books. So another area that I spoke of that was something that seemed very glossed over was the science. In the book, they go through a very detailed, well, not very detailed, but enough where, someone who's age 9 to, 13, 15 can understand what a tesseract is. And there's that lovely image, which I think is in my missing pages of my book, which I think I showed the book in this one. If I didn't, here's my book from when I was little. It's all torn up. It's missing the first 75 pages. So, Woohoo! It's actually on the chapter that talks about the Tesseract, and it's got my dedication from my mommy back in 1998. So, true fan, true fan. Yes. So, the science part. It's just not. They cover a little bit of it. You see in the beginning, there's a beautiful scene in the beginning where Meg is with her father and they're learning about science and she's doing an experiment with him and it's super cute. I really enjoyed that. I wish they had shown more of that with Meg now so that we could see that she's very bright, very intelligent. She just doesn't believe in herself. And that's a huge part of what this journey is about in this book, is believing in herself, having faith, and then the power of love. But we don't really get to see too much of that. We see a little bit of it. There's a couple of scenes where she does a little bit of science, and then of course, Calvin's sitting over there just like doe-eyed because he stays pretty much that way throughout the whole film, and I'm just like, I need you to serve more of a purpose. All right, so I mean, even his introduction into the movie was a little bizarre. So they had run into Miss Whatsit. Miss Whatsit had come to the house middle of the night. They go downstairs. Charles Wallace is all excited to see her. Their mom is like, "Who are you? You need to get out of my house." This was a great line, great scene. Meg goes, "Do you want me to call 911?" I was like, "Yes, girl. Yes, girl. Look out for your family and call the cops." But, so Mrs. Whatsit leaves and, that's their first introduction to them and to the missus. And then they're going on a walk. And Meg is lecturing Charles about talking to strangers. And he's like, "I don't talk to strangers. They talk to me." And he was great. Charles Wallace's character in the movie was great. He was really quite funny. And so then they eventually get to this other part of the neighborhood and they're walking with their dog, which the dog's not really in the movie either. The dog was in the book. Anyways. And they run into Calvin, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he was like, "I don't know. I just had this urge, this feeling like I needed to be right here." And he was like, "Is that weird?" And Meg was like, "Yeah, that's a little weird." And I was like, "Y'all, come on now. Give me a little bit more. Give me more." And so then Charles Wallace runs off into the house and, he never listens, which is it's an important part of the story, is that Charles Wallace is very, he knows so much. He is so smart that he feels like he has to kind of stand up for Meg and lead the way and be able to be her strength when she's unable to, be the adventurous, the explorer. And so they fall in, and there's I think it's Mrs. Who, and she's there, and it's Mindy Kaling, and she's so fun. She's, using all the verses, but they're updated references. So she's making references, she makes references throughout the book or throughout the movie to like Outcast and things like that. And I'm like, that's so fun. Like that's super cute that they would go in and update that. And so, but they talk to her for like 2 seconds. They literally get introduced to her and then they're like, she's falling out asleep. And I was just like, wait, okay. And no one thinks this is weird. No one really does anything. Meg's like, "I don't trust nobody," which I'm like, look, with all this stuff that's going on, I wouldn't either, because this is madness. There's an issue with on the playground, and they're talking about, the mean teachers are talking about the family, and Charles Wallace stands up for the family and for Meg, and then he tries to go in and encourage Meg, and it's really embarrassing. So she hits old girl in the face with a basketball, and she was like, because, it's the character from Girl Meets World on the Disney Channel. I don't remember her name. I think it's Rowan something. I love her. She's an amazing actress. And she's like, she called Charles Wallace crazy. And I was like, but that's not too, accurate. But I know, stand up for your family. Stand up for your family. And so, the teacher's like, "I don't know what happened. You just need to realize your father's not coming back. He's been gone for 4 years. And so she's like, "Oh, okay." She's stubborn. She's mad. She runs out. And then her mom is trying to talk some sense into her. She's like, "I want you to write apologies." I mean, her mom really has a minuscule role at best. And she's like, I'm not going to write them letters. They were wrong. Dad said for me to stand up for what I believe in. And she was like, don't use your father that way. And I was like, oh my gosh, is no one in this family going to go get some counseling? Because you all have some issues that y'all need to work through. This is a mess. And so eventually, I don't even remember why Calvin's there. But Calvin's there, and they end up in the backyard, and they're like, it's time to go. The missus arrive, and they're like, here we go. It's time to go on this adventure. We're going to use the Tesseract. Your dad was right. He's still alive. We're going to go get him. Let's go save him. And so, everyone else is like, well, I guess, Charles Wallace, because he's had this prior relationship to the missus, he's all for it. And, Reese Witherspoon's Mrs. Watson is like, I don't know about Meg. She doesn't seem like she can make it. I don't think she's going to help. This isn't going to work. We don't need her. And Mrs. Oprah is like, she's here. We need her. We're going to give her a shot. Let's try this. So they eventually go and do the Tesseract, which it was super fun to watch. It did actually remind me a little bit of Annihilation, the movie that I did my last review on, because it was just very kind of like a fractured view of things, so that it was like you were getting to see time be broken, which of course, they don't explain what a Tesseract is, so it's not like you would understand what's happening in that moment. And I remember reading through some comments on other reviews, and people were like, oh, a Tesseract like from Thor. And someone was like, yeah, she wrote this book way before Thor Ragnarok ever came along. Like, Tesseract is not a new thing. And so Tesseract, which they don't really talk about, so you don't really get necessarily the connection between A Wrinkle in Time and a Tesseract, which is what A Wrinkle in Time is, which is the taking the planes and making the connection, so that you, instead of having to travel all the way here or all the way there, you just make jumps. You just make jumps and you bring them together. I don't think they ever actually explain that in the movie. I know that they talk about time or space travel, but I don't think they ever make anything explicit as to why it would be known as a wrinkle in time. So that's the connection. So they're going and they make the trip. They go to the first planet. Gorgeous. Absolutely amazing. It looked like somewhere I was like, if someone was to make an amusement park, I would want an amusement park for somewhere like this. They go, they talk to the flowers. The flowers tell them that their dad was there. Mrs. West changes into this. Oh, goodness. I'm trying to think. There was a movie. I think it had Beyonce in it, about like flowers. And it was, one of them was like the flower or the goddess of the spring or something like that. That was Beyonce's role. And then like she died or something. And so there was another little flower girl who had to take her space. I have no idea what this movie is called, but that's what Mrs. Watson ended up transforming and looking like, into this like leaf boat thing, which, this is what she was supposed to look like. So I don't know what really happened there. But I guess, creativity, all right. But it was cool. They had some fun. They were flying through the air, and then they run across the, the nothingness, the darkness, and I believe it's Calvin falls off, and then he almost falls, and the flowers go to save him, and they're all excited. And so then they're like, okay, well, we gotta figure out what happened to your father next and where he went. Let's go to a seer. And they're like, what's a seer? And so they're like, it's a person who's able to see things that we can't. So let's go visit them. And then the seer is like supposed to be, like in kind of with Mrs. Whatsit, but not really with Mrs. Whatsit, because it was weird. It was one of those things that kind of made you wonder, like, how you have a friend sometimes who's like, oh yeah, me and this guy are talking, or yeah, I like this girl, and we were chatting the other day, and then you keep asking questions, and you keep finding out more, and then eventually you realize that they like their comment on Instagram or something, and they've never had a real life conversation. It's just kind of all been in their head. That's kind of what that relationship was like, watching Mrs. Rutset and The Happy Medium. Now, I loved The Happy Medium. in the book, because the happy medium in the book was about, you had to find that happy medium. You had to find that balance in order to be able to see beyond what was. He was strange. He was a little strange in the movie, but it was good. It was Zach. I cannot remember his last name, but he was good. Wasn't anything bad. A little strange, but he was supposed to be strange. And so they're having a difficult, Meg, of course, is having a difficult time being able to go there, to go into this vulnerable space where she has to see her father in order to be able to find him. And so they have to find a way to show her what they're really dealing with, and seeing kind of the pain and the devastation and the cruelty that goes along with the nothingness, the evil of it. Because it is one of those things where I do think that we get separated from this idea about good and evil and what we're doing and right and wrong. And so in watching this, it did make me think, honestly, about making sure that I'm mindful of my actions, and that I'm not intentionally harming others, and that I take responsibility for what goes on around me. Oprah does quite a few lines. So she's all about being a warrior. That's her whole spiel for the whole movie, is about be a warrior. You have to be a warrior. And Meg, with her non-committal self, is like, I'll try, like, I guess, if I have to. And so but it did make you think, okay, yes, you want to do the right thing. You want to be on the right side of justice and of the actions that you do. You want to make sure that you're not cruel to other people. So that was really nice, and I really liked that continuous storyline. So we have them, and they figure out where the dad is, and they're like, we can't go to that place because there's no light there, and we can only connect with the light. And so then Meg's like, but we can't just leave. We can't go home. We can't. So she's holding so strongly, because she's so stubborn, one of her faults, that she ends up subverting the Tesseract and forcing them to go to the planet where it lives. And so they get there, and they're like, oh, Meg, we knew you could do it. It was like, oh, we were setting you up. We were trying to challenge you because we knew this was going to be the only way we could get you to do as needed to be done to get onto this planet. And so then they're like, we're going to give you gifts. And so Mrs. Who gives her glasses so that she can, and there's this whole thing that they do with, I don't remember what you call them, but when, we were younger, you'd put your hands in there, and the fortune tellers, little paper fortune tellers, and you could move it and it would shift. And they made one where it was a heart, and they were like, our family is about love, and the love, it never breaks, it never ends, it just gets, what is it called, enfolded, I believe is what it was. Enfolded or something like that. And so, it just shifts, it just changes, but it never goes away. And so she gives her the glasses so she can see things that have been changed. And then, and see things for what they really are. And then Mrs. What's-it gives her faults. She was like, you already know what they are, they'll work well for you. And Mrs. Who is like, mine is a command. And I was like, yes, girl, don't give them choices. She was like, you must stay together. And so, of course, right when she says you must stay together, they get separated. We miss out on a lot of the Charles Wallace adventure and what goes on with him when he gets to this planet and gets separated and kind of goes through this whole process of figuring out where he is and things like that. We get Meg and Calvin running through this forest, and they get to the end, and they have to get up to the wall and get over the wall. And so then Meg is like, she starts to use those smarts because she is quite intelligent, and she figures out, she's like, okay, it's a catapult, it's a catapult. We gotta get inside of here, and it's gonna throw us over. And so that's what they do. They climb up in a tree, and they have this, Aladdin scene moment. That's what it was. It was Aladdin, this, the do you trust me before getting on the magic carpet. And, Jasmine was like, I guess, but Calvin was like, yes, I trust you. And she was like, let's go. And so then they run and hide in the tree. So they make it over the wall, and Charles Wallace is there, and he's like, I was waiting for you guys. I couldn't find y'all, but okay, we're here now. Let's go. I see a neighborhood. And So, you know, that Calvin, which is funny, like it's the only kind of reference they make to it. He's always hungry. He always wants to eat. And so he's like, is anybody else starving? I smell food. And they're like, oh yeah, we're hungry. But, you know, um, Meg was advised to be suspicious of everything, to use that natural mistrust she has of everyone to guide them and keep them safe. And so they get to and I love that scene. I've always loved it, whether in whatever way it was portrayed, where there's all the houses there, everything is exactly identical. And it's kind of like 1950s, you know, 1920s, no, 1950s, 1940s, you know, retro remix. And so you have all the housewives come out, and so all the kids are bouncing these red balls in their yards. Everyone's hair is the same. Everyone has on the same outfits. Everything, there's just different colors. And I'm sorry, I had a little chuckle because there are some of those outfits and some of the ways they have those kids dressed up. I was just like, I mean, Lollipop Guild from from the Wizard of Oz, and like like Willy Wonka. I was just like, what? Who did the outfits for this? But it was good. It was good. You did see where there is that in the book it's more prominent, but there's this sound, this tone that goes on, and it's very distracting. It's pulsing. It's like what I always thought of it was kind of like in out of rhythm, out of sync with like your natural heartbeat, which is calming from in general. It reminds of us being in the safe space of the womb. So there's that bouncing of the ball, which kind of throws them off. And Charles Wallace expresses, he's like, I don't like the sound. I can't stand this. And so then, you know, the mothers come out, and I will not remember her name, but it's Millie from Scandal. She's out here. She done left the White House, and now she's living on this evil planet, you know, playing games and trying to trick little children into coming inside her house to do, you know, evil things to them and feed them all this cake. And so she's like, I have food, you know, are y'all hungry? I have roast beef, and I have all the cakes in the world. And, you know, Calvin's like, yes, food, let's go. And Meg's like, no, thank you, we don't know you. And she's just like, oh, well, fine, okay. So then, you know, she's walking away, and he's like, she said she had food. And Meg is like, we're not supposed to trust anybody. And then all the houses start to change, and then they end up on a beach. And then I was like, okay, well, beach I could kind of get down with. But then there are all these people there. And I was like, ugh. And they walk towards the people. I was like, why would you walk towards all these random people? Like, walk somewhere where you could actually find someone and everyone can stay together. It's going to be too easy to get separated with all these people. So then they're walking through there, and there's food. Again, there's food. And this guy comes along who looks suspect. And he's like, oh, you know, hi, y'all. What are y'all doing here? And she's like, we're here to try to find our dad. And he's like, oh, you know, I've seen him. You know, I just saw him a little while. And they were like, can you take him to us? And he was like, for sure. You know, he's working really hard. So, you know, the shade. He was like, he's been working really hard. So it's hard to catch him sometimes. You know, you don't get to see him too much. But you know all about that. I was like, whoop, whoop. All right, then we're going there. And so then he's like, you know, but there's some food here. Have some food. And so Calvin again is like, let's eat. So he's sitting here shoving sandwiches in his mouth, and Charles Wallace is like, okay, I'll try some. And he tries some. He's like, it tastes like sand. And so Calvin's like, here, try mine. And he's like, it tastes like sand. I don't want to eat this. And the guy's like, I knew you were different. I knew you were smart. I knew you were like me. And so he starts doing this, and it's a big thing inside of the book, but these timetables. And so he does those with Charles Wallace, and Charles Wallace is like immediately hypnotized, even though there's no premise to any of this alluded to in the book, and why this would be enticing for him, and why he would be interested in any of this, you know. So you have to know why this is important for that to make any sense. And so then he's like, come with me. And so they leave, and Meg's like, where are you taking my brother? And he's like, oh, he's coming with me, you know, see you later. And then they end up, they chase after them, and then something happens where they end up in the room, and you see the man who took him, and he's just a puppet. He's literally got puppet strings, which I thought was actually really cool, the way that they played that out. And Charles Wallace is, you know, kind of ruling the puppet. He's running the show now, because that was the whole thing in the book, was that Charles Wallace is really, because he's so smart, he could take care of himself. But it's that paradox between being so wise and being so smart and yet not having experience because he's so young, because he hasn't been in this world for long, and that he needs people to take care of him. But he's in his bravado stage. He's sitting there telling them, I'm the smartest one. I'm the one who knows what to do. I'm the one that they came after. I'm the most important one. And so he's just kind of toying with them and things like that. And so then she remembers she has the glasses. So she puts them on and realizes that the room is not what it appears to be. And so I think it's enfolded is what they call it. But she goes up these stairs, and that's when her and Calvin have that whole scene about they're just like, yes, you got this. But, let's only look at each other. We won't talk. So then she goes upstairs, and she comes and she finds her dad. And he's sitting there looking like he's been stuck in this room for 4 years. And they go through this whole, and that was, oh my goodness, that was one of the most heart-touching scenes. It was so sweet getting to see her, because, God, I'll say it was heart-touching for me because I love my father. Like, my dad is amazing. Shout out to my dad. And so I was like, yes, she found her daddy. And so that was really sweet. And he was like, I would never leave you. I didn't mean to. I was just got so caught up and I couldn't get back. And so then they're like, okay, well, let's try to get out of here, right? So he goes back with her, and they're sitting there. He's going back and forth with Charles Wallace. Now, remember, in the movie, Charles Wallace is adopted. So he was like, my son. And Charles Wallace was like, am I? I don't know you. Where have you been? I haven't seen you. And so it's just kind of like, well, I mean, he has a point. Like, you've been gone for 4 years, and Charles Wallace is like, what, 8? If that old, he's like 6. Like, he doesn't know you, dude. Like, you're just this rando that they said, adopted him and is his dad. In the book, it makes so much more sense because that is his dad, and because they are very similar. They are both really bright and smart, and that was part of what helped them to get along and to help Charles Wallace not feel so different. So, that was amusing to me. And so then he was like, I'm going to take you. And you realize that Charles Wallace has been taken over by the darkness, by the nothing. And so you're like, oh no. So his dad is like, all right, so I bet you I can tesseract us out of here. And we can escape, and we'll go home and we'll regroup and it'll be fine. And he's like, we're just gonna leave Charles Wallace here. We're just gonna leave him behind. We'll come back for him later. And I was like, really? You just left your kids. Like, you just left them, and now you're like, oh well, I guess we don't need Charles Wallace. Like, he'll be all right. We'll come back later. And it was, I got what he was saying, because he was like, I don't want to lose both my children, so I'll do what I can to protect one of you. But I was like, dude, you are just like messing up. Like, you were just effing up over and over again. Why? Okay, like, you got to learn how to stick around, dude. So Meg is like, I'm not going to leave him. She's like, we're not going to leave him, Dad. Like, what are you doing? And so Charles Wallace was dragging them down the hall to the nothingness, to it, and the dad and Calvin tesseract out of there. So that's the last see of Calvin until the end. Like I said, he really was kind of, filler. And so then they go through this whole thing about Meg realizes she has to use her faults. Because he tries to use that against her to make her want to join the nothingness, to give in and to, join in. There's this cool scene where you get to see a girl, you get to see Meg, who's all dressed up and perfect. And she's like, I don't want to be like that. That's not really me. And even though I have these faults, like, they're what make me special. And so she goes through this whole thing and she gets back to, but I love you. She was like, to Charles Wallace, she says, I have all these faults. There's all these things that I don't do right, but you love me anyway because I deserve to be loved, and I love you because you deserve to be loved, and we can't give up on each other because we love each other. The thing that I think I loved most about the book, that I always found to be the most exciting, was that there really wasn't, everyone kind of had these extraordinary talents and things. Charles Wallace was really bright. The twins were bright. They were smart and they were good at sports and getting along with people. Their moms and dad were brilliant scientists. You know, Calvin was a star. He was a star basketball player. He was a star at school. Everyone loved him. And then you had Meg, who wore glasses and had curly. They were redheads in the book. Had curly red hair, and she was just. She wasn't necessarily super good at anything. You know, she did well, but Meg was tenacious. She would not give up. What she believed in, she held on to, and she fought for it. And she loved. She loved deeply and strongly, and she saw the beauty in the quirks that other people looked down upon. And she knew how important her family and the people she cared about was. And she was willing to fight for them. And that was where everyone else had these strengths that were more external. She had this intrinsic internal strength that surrounded her ability to love deeply, unwaveringly. And so I felt like that was missing a little bit. It wasn't as clear to see in the movie, but you knew that it was really important, that their family bond was important. And so eventually that breaks through after Meg gets beat up a bit. And, you know, they have a little bonding moment, and then she brought back the lights, so the misses are there, and, you know, of course they show up when everything's done. And they're like, congratulations, and she gets to start the Tesseract. She had a hard time Tesseracting, or Tessering. And she gets them back. She actually gets to experience what it is to go through a Tesseract, and it's beautiful. She has this amazing, beautiful time. And they get back home, and they have a reunion. And it was a little bit of a quick reunion. That was a little unexpected. And everything ends up being great. It ends up going really well and being great in the end. And so that's kind of pretty much what happens in the movie. It's sweet. It's sweet. It's touching. Oh, there is the scene between her dad, you know, because her dad left him, right? Their dad left him with the evil again. And so, like, you get back, and she's just looking at him like, you again. And I said, she is going to have daddy issues. Like, this Meg is not doing well in the father department. And so he's like, I tried to hold the hand of the universe, and I should have been trying to hold your hand. And she's like, okay. And I was like, you are going to end up having to buy her all types of things, take her all types of places to make up for this, because you don't let this girl twice. And so, again, that's the end of the movie, pretty much. They introduce him back to the mom, and he's like, sorry I'm late. And it was really sweet. It was super sweet, but there were moments where I was like, this is neat. This is interesting. So I enjoyed it though. Again, music was amazing. Soundtrack was perfect. It fit every scene perfectly. It had the flow going. I just wish that there was more. I wish there had been more, but I think that that's one of the reasons why it's been a TV adaptation, is because it needs so much time and so much development, and there's so many like details that need to be added in, and it takes time. Even with that, you end up missing out on things because you're trying to fit it into this small time frame. So I enjoyed it. I want to go a little bit more into depth with the differences between the book and the movie, but to explain some of the issues with the movie, you had to know a little bit about what was going on in the book. And I think that's going to be it. I think that's all I'm going to say about this. I hope that if you go and see this, that you go and enjoy yourself, that you keep things light and fun, that you are able to grasp the overall message of the movie, share it with others, act from a space of love and caring and kindness, and enjoy your day. Thanks for watching. Bye.